Hey there, Father Michael here. So, I had just turned 40 and I was living a life that, in many ways, was pretty darn near perfect. My first son was about to graduate high school and head off to college. I had the love and support of my Ukrainian parish family, and indeed, even the respect of my bishop and the Synod of Presbyters, which means the priestly boys only club. I was one of two musicians in the entire diocese who had essentially taught himself the entire Ukrainian Byzantine liturgy in English, and who, as a result, found himself in a position of a lot of admiration and respect. My job was also something that I really enjoyed, especially, those daily encounters and interactions with the Sisters of the Holy Cross for whom I worked. My employees in my department respected me and unhesitatingly jumped into whatever crazy, deranged projects our director threw at us. So looking back on all of that, it's hard to remember a time prior to that when so many things seemed to be falling into place so perfectly. And then one Holy Thursday at the end of March, the sun was shining, the temperatures were well above normal. I was in peak physical condition of my life as I drove into campus that day, jamming in my truck, wearing a black muscle shirt to show off my big guns and pecs. And I bounded into the office and greeted the department secretary, whose name was Joyce, and I said, absolutely nothing can ruin this day. Well, fast forward 12 hours to the moment when the police and the chaplain were standing at my door, informing me that my son, Christopher, had been killed in a fatal car crash. And as the ground essentially opened up and swallowed me, everything else that I had come to depend on got sucked into that swirling black vortex of grief. Everything that I had thought were indispensable in my life suddenly, these things seemed irrelevant and not worth the time. Everything came into question, with the exception of my faith in God. Christopher's funeral happened on a Tuesday, the following week, Tuesday after Easter, on the day that is called in the Ukrainian Byzantine Church Bright Tuesday. The church was brimming with Easter flowers mixed in with more funeral flowers than I have ever seen before or since. I guess the advantage of dying young. And the royal doors, which are normally kept closed except for when the divine liturgy is in process, those doors are kept open for the entire 8 days after Easter to symbolize that Christ has in fact burst asunder the doors of death and Hades. The funeral liturgy itself, since it was during Easter week, was not the somber, mournful affair that I had learned. It's instead replaced with a much more joyful service. Some of the prayers are the same, but throughout it's peppered with that Christos voskrese i smertivik smertiu smert poprao. Isus chim vohorovich život darovao. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death and bringing life to all those in the tomb. True to Byzantine practice, the casket was opened for the entire funeral liturgy with a formal goodbye at the end from the entire parish family. And one by one, everyone came up in the hundreds to make their final farewells to a young man whose short life had nonetheless touched so many. And due to a last-minute family emergency, my friend, the only other English singing cantor in the diocese who lived in Chicago, he had a family emergency and was unable to come down to sing Christopher's funeral, and so I had no choice but to step up and sing the entire funeral myself. So in a packed church with people out onto the streets, I stepped out into the main aisle, trembling, uncertain that I would even have a voice. And I remember looking at Christopher in his coffin and saying, "Please, Chris, let me do this one thing." And I opened my mouth and I found my note and I sang the entire funeral for the next hour and a half. And as we made our procession then, as we made that procession out of the church at the end, the whole congregation continuing to sing the chant, "Christ is risen from the dead," over and over, it hit me. And I remember thinking to myself, all of the music that I have performed, all the performances that I have ever given in the entirety of my 40 years, all of that was simply a rehearsal for this one final performance. I will never sing again, and I will never laugh again. My life continued down a dark path, I have to say, for many months after that. And I made an unfortunate discovery during those early weeks, one that would haunt me and one that would resurface powerfully quite a few years down the road, namely that mixing Xanax with alcohol makes sleep possible, makes functioning possible, makes going through the motions possible. In John's Gospel, chapter 4, there is that well-known story of the Samaritan woman at the well. And in John's telling of the story, he's the only of the four gospel writers to tell us this story. Jesus greets her exactly as she is. He meets her exactly where she is in her life. He knew that her life had been full of missteps and tragedies and bad choices, but he did not judge her and he did not cast her aside. Instead, he offered her himself as living water, and all she had to do was ask. Chapter 4, verse 10, Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who's asking you for a drink of water, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water to drink." And she does. And she's so transformed and refreshed, and her deepest thirsts are quenched. She's so overjoyed having received the gift that she abandons her water jugs at the well, and she simply runs back to her village to tell everybody her good news. And her testimony of having found new life and new purpose was credible and compelling only because of what her life had looked like before. And so it is with this Medicare receiving aging priest. Through the grace and the mercy of God, I was able to hold fast to my faith in God. I never doubted. I was never angry. And gradually, and I mean gradually I came to decide to allow God to lead me forward into a new land where I did not want to go, to a place without Christopher's presence, where I knew I would grieve him the rest of my days. And yet, amazing new life was possible, and in fact came to be again and again. God is still leading me and you all the time. And yes, there are days when I struggle and you struggle, but overall, maybe we are all headed in the right direction. And as for never singing, never laughing again, well, funny thing about that, because I'm still singing. And I found the laughter once again that I never in a million years thought I would ever find. It ain't over till it's over. If you knew the gift of God and who it is you were asking for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Pray with me. God of the music and the laughing, the tears and the anguish, we open our hearts, broken, full of shadows though they may be, trusting in your love and in your mercy. We believe, even when we doubt, that you desire nothing but our highest good. Help us today, then, through your grace, to be a little patient with ourselves, to do a little more attentive listening to your still speaking voice within us, and to allow you to guide us to finding and to doing the next right thing. For all the times when you have led us and we were unaware, we are thankful. Help us today to focus on choosing to see the path forward instead of dwelling on the past. And for all of those you will send our way today, let us perhaps be the little flickering flame of light that they need to see in their own darkness. Amen. Amen. blessed, joyful, singing, laughing day.